Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, and Macho Man Randy Savage. These legends weren't just the stars of the golden era, they were the WWF World Heavyweight Champions who defined a generation of wrestling. In the 1980s, cable TV boomed, pay-per-view was born, and the Rock and Wrestling connection brought professional wrestling into the mainstream like never before. But only 5 men held the coveted WWF World Heavyweight Championship in this iconic decade. And we are ranking them all. Kicking off our list at number 5 is Bob Backlund. Before developing his popular heel gimmick of Mr. Bob Backlund and presidential candidate Bob Backlund in the 1990s, Bob Backlund was a young star who entered 1980 as the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. Backlund had a stellar amateur career as a 2-time All-American in college in wrestling, a 1-time All-American in football, and the 1971 Division II Wrestling Champion. He made his professional wrestling debut in 1973, and just 5 years later, he defeated superstar Billy Graham in February 1978 to win the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. To this day, Backlund still has the second longest title reign in WWF history at 2,135 days, until he lost to the Iron Sheik in December 1983. So why is he at the bottom of this list? Well, despite being champion for 5 years, there just isn't that much memorable about his time as WWF champion. Even his biggest match during this time, a steel cage match in 1982 against Superfly Jimmy Snuka, was completely overshadowed by Snuka's match against Don Morocco a year later when Jimmy Superfly Snuka completed that famous splash off the top of the cage. You know, this is the match that Mick Foley attended. During this time, people also remember the famous alley match with Sergeant Slaughter and Pat Patterson. And the biggest event of that time, the Showdown at the Shea in 1980, was headlined with Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko. Also remembered for that first match between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. What did Bob Backlund do during this event? Well, he was in a tag team match with Pedro Morales. Although they did win the WWF Tag Team Championship from the Wild Samoans, no one remembers that. So why does no one talk about Bob Backlund during this time? Part of it because he didn't have the best of opponents at the world title level. He also spent a lot of time in tag team matches. And he also did a lot of matches with champions of other promotions, including the NWA's Harley Race and the AWA's Nick Bockwinkel. But Backlund's place in history is completely overshadowed about what was going on before, during, and after his time as champion. Just a few years earlier, Bruno Sammartino was the star of the WWF and was still an overwhelming presence during Backlund's title reign. And what happened after Bob Backlund? January 1984, the birth of Hulkamania, the cover of Sports Illustrated, WrestleMania, the world. Vince McMahon didn't want to go global with Bob Backlund. He wanted Hulk Hogan. And the competition, the NWA, well, in 1981, a little unknown wrestler by the name of Ric Flair happened to win his first World Heavyweight Championship. In a lot of ways, Bob Backlund is a forgotten star of the 1980s, a symbol of the previous wrestling generation. And you never hear wrestlers of the 90s or 2000s or today talk about, the influence of Bob Backlund. They always talk about Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair and Harley Race, Nick Bockwinkel, Andre the Giant, even the Ultimate Warrior. Has anyone ever mentioned Bob Backlund as their favorite wrestler of all time? And Backlund's time when he returned in 1992 and actually won the WWF Championship in 1994, although it was for a couple days, is probably how people best remember Bob Backlund, as this crazy man who kept wanting to run for president and use big words that he didn't know. Next on our list at number 4, the Iron Sheik, the originator of the Hak Tour. The Iron Sheik started his wrestling career in 1972, training with Vern Gagne in the AWA, and was actually in the same training class as Ric Flair. After traveling to multiple territories in the 70s and early 80s, the Sheik burst onto the scene in 1983 in the WWF, proudly supporting his birth country of Iran. During extremely tense times between the USA and Iran, he shockingly beat Bob Backlund in December of 1983. To win the match, the Iron Sheik had Bob Backlund in his vicious Camel Clutch hold, and Backlund's manager, Arnold Skaaland, threw in the towel. The Sheik's victory ended Backlund's historic title reign of 2,135 days. And it wasn't just the victory itself that made this moment memorable. It was the aftermath. The Iron Sheik's victory set the stage for one of the most pivotal moments in WWF history. His short reign, lasting just 28 days, was the calm before the storm that would change professional wrestling forever. January 1984, the Iron Sheik lost the title to Hulk Hogan. The match launched Hulkamania to the next level, the WWF to the next level, and professional wrestling to heights it hadn't seen in years. There was also a tremendous amount of mystique around this match. Years later, the Iron Sheik claimed that his original trainer, Vern Gagne, had offered him $100,000 to break Hulk Hogan's leg and then leave the WWF as champion. This would have been devastating to a young Vince McMahon and his aspirations to take the company global. Yes, the Iron Sheik is the definition of a transitional champion, but don't let that short reign fool you. He was a master of heat, a true heel who could rile up the crowd like no one else. The promos, signature mustache, those curled boots, and iconic Camel Clutch made him one of the most recognizable and unforgettable figures of the 1980s, and not just in wrestling, throughout all of pop culture. So why does the Iron Sheik rank above Bob Backlund? While Backlund's reign was longer, the Iron Sheik's impact was immediate and lasting. He played a crucial role in one of the most important title changes in WWF history, and his legacy as one of wrestling's greatest heels is undeniable. He also was the winner of the WrestleMania 17 Gimmick Battle Royal. Next on our list at number 3 is Andre the Giant. I can hear it already. How is someone that was only champion for 32 seconds be this high on this list? Well, because it's Andre the freaking Giant. And that 32 seconds was one of the most important events in professional wrestling during the 1980s. You know him as the 8th wonder of the world. Andre the Giant was billed at 7 feet 4 inches tall and weighing in at over 500 pounds. Andre really burst onto the professional wrestling scene in 1973 as he toured all throughout the world as a true larger-than-life attraction. Andre became a mainstay in the WWF in 1984 as Vince McMahon started his worldwide expansion. A babyface throughout his career, Andre is best remembered for his heel turn in 1987 and being in the main event match at WrestleMania III against Hulk Hogan, which drew the largest indoor crowd of 93,173 people. I know the nerds are going to go crazy and say, but that's not true. That's not what I read online. It was less than that. And blah, blah, blah. I don't care. And that match with Hulk Hogan led to so much more. The creation of the Survivor Series in 1987, and then to Andre's infamous title win against Hulk Hogan in February 1988. A record 33 million viewers turned into that match on the main event on NBC to watch Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. And you already know the ending. Andre suplexes Hogan, covers for the pin. The evil Hebner twin counts to 3, even though Hogan's shoulder is up, and we have a brand new champion. For 32 seconds, Andre then forfeits the championship to the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, which sets us on course to WrestleMania IV. Andre's placing on this list of the top WWF champions of the 1980s is the result of his enormous impact that title match and victory had on professional wrestling. It ended what seemed like an undefeatable Hulk Hogan and drew the largest TV crowd ever. Number 2, Macho Man Randy Savage. The Macho Man became a top 10 all-time wrestler as a direct result of this WWF World Heavyweight title reign from 1988 to 1989. The Macho Man winning 4 matches at WrestleMania IV and becoming the undisputed champion was an iconic moment that lasts forever. As he held Miss Elizabeth on his shoulder and had Hulk Hogan cheering him on, it was the start to one of the greatest storylines of all time, the birth and then ultimate explosion of the Mega Powers. Macho Man Randy Savage debuted in the WWF in the summer of 1985, and by February 1986, he was the Intercontinental Champion after defeating Tito Santana. Savage held that title until his legendary match against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat at WrestleMania III that is still considered one of the best matches of all time. On an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event in October of 1987, Miss Elizabeth brought Hulk Hogan out to save the Macho Man Randy Savage, which ultimately gave us one of the greatest professional wrestling memes of all time. Fast forward a few months, WrestleMania IV, the Macho Man won the tournament and became the WWF Champion for the first time. The Mega Powers were one of the hottest things in professional wrestling at that time. Their feud with Andre the Giant and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase led to the birth of SummerSlam. The storytelling and the tiny nuggets placed throughout this year is still considered some of the best storytelling in wrestling history. The moments with Hogan hugging Elizabeth, when they clashed at the Royal Rumble, and the main event tension that led to Hulk Hogan lusting for Elizabeth. This title reign from WrestleMania IV to WrestleMania V was one of the most successful times in wrestling history. And then their match at WrestleMania V had one of the largest pay-per-view buys of all time. 767,000 buys, a record that stood for 10 years. And the top of our list at number 1, Hulk Hogan. I mean, what are we even talking about here? Was there any doubt that Hulk Hogan would top our list of the best WWF champions of the 1980s? Hogan held the title for 1,474 days, from January 1984 to February 1988. Without exaggeration, without hyperbole, Hulk Hogan's title reign is what made professional wrestling mainstream and has kept it here for all of these years. Wrestling is pop culture because of what Hulk Hogan did. Wrestling is one of the most popular categories still on YouTube because of the foundation that Hulk Hogan built. Not only is he the best WWF champion of the 1980s, he is, without a doubt, the most influential wrestler of all time.